Hi, I'm Toby Tobin from GoToby.com and from Real Estate Matters. Since 2006, over 3,000 pages of content on my website, GoToby.com. And since 2014, over 400 radio shows on the local WNCF News Radio. Now I'm going to video. So this is our first try, our first video. We should have several videos. We're basically going to be bringing to you new content, as well as video of content from prior radio shows and from our webpage. Today I want to talk about homestead exemptions. What a lot of people don't realize, people moving to Florida or those who moved from elsewhere to Florida don't understand that real estate laws are very state specific. And Florida's are even more specific than other states. And people, they may have moved from another state where they have a homestead exemption law. Many states do, but the Florida homestead exemption law, really, if you're from another state, you might as well be a foreign national because you haven't a clue about how the Homestead Exemption Act in Florida works. It's very detailed, it's very complicated, very comprehensive, and very advantageous to Florida residents. There are three different ways in which the homestead exemption law helps Florida residents or Florida property owning residents. The first is asset protection. And people like O.J. Simpson know this fact very well. In Florida, if you're homesteaded, your home is protected from civil seizure or civil judgments with no dollar limitation whatsoever. You could have a $10 million home that's homesteaded in Florida, and it's immune from civil judgments. The second is that homesteading gives homestead exemptions. There are several exemptions that apply. The most notable are the $50,000 standard homestead exemption and another $50,000 senior exemption that is age and income limited. The third profound difference is that Florida homesteading allows you to benefit from what we call the Save Our Homes Amendment. And Save Our Homes Amendment puts a cap on the increase in your assessed value for property tax purposes. And that limit is your assessed value once you're homesteaded and apply and are accepted. Your increase in assessed value cannot be more than 3% or the consumer price index increase, whichever is lower. So it's the lesser of CPI or the 3%. Okay, first, I want to just briefly touch the asset protection side. I'm not an attorney, I'm not a CPA. If you want legal advice or financial advice, you should be talking to those professionals. But in very general, broad terms, the asset protection portion allows you up to a half an acre of property if you're in a city or a town, an incorporated entity, again with no limitation. If you're in a rural, unincorporated part of Florida, then you can have up to 160 acres that's exempt. And again, that's civil matters only. The IRS, of course, can still come after you, but your standard run-of-the-mill debtors cannot. So those judgments cannot apply against your homestead. The second big benefit from homesteading is the homestead exemption itself. And here's how it works. First of all, to homestead, you have to meet three qualifications, and these are critical qualifications. One, the owner intends to maintain the property as a primary residence. So you need to be prepared to prove that it's a primary residence, showing things like driver's license, car registration, voter registration, utility bills at that address. Those are examples of things that the property appraiser's office where your application is made will be asking for. The second qualification is that the owner occupies and resides on the property. So to be your primary residence, it makes sense that you should have to live there. So that's the second qualifying fact. The third is that the owner holds legal title individually or as a revocable living trust. So you can't just rent there, you have to own it, and with one of those two ownership types. If you're an LLC, that won't qualify. So again, talk to an attorney to get detailed information and a legal opinion when you want further information on that qualification. So now let's get to some of the important dates. Now for the asset protection portion, you don't have to register. The first day on which you satisfy all the three requirements, in other words, you're the owner, you've declared it as your primary residence, and also that you're occupying or living there, on that very first day, you automatically qualify for the asset protection portion. You don't have to make application. There's no qualifying date, January 1st or March 1st. Could be July 6th, and on that day you qualify. The second important date is January 1st. And on the January 1st, after you meet the three criteria, after you qualify for the exemption, on that date you will receive for that following tax year a $50,000 offset against your assessed value. You take the assessed value, subtract the exemption to get to your taxable value. If you are over 65 and you meet the income qualifications, there's another $50,000 exemption that you could earn as well. And that, again, is as of the January 1st after you qualify. So you could qualify before January 1st at any time or on January 1st. The third important date is March 1st. That's the date, that's the cutoff date for qualifying. So you could apply on March 1st for the exemption that would apply to that tax year. And January 1st is an important date because that's when the exemptions are applied. In Florida, every property is reassessed each year, and it's assessed for that tax year, and it's assessed based on the value judgment of the property appraiser as of January 1st that year. So this gets complicated, but it's important that you understand it, because I cannot tell you how many people have told me that, oh, I wish I'd only known. Somebody didn't tell me. Well, the people in the real estate industry are not always good at telling you something like this, because it's perhaps a little more complicated than some of them can understand. New residents to Florida typically will have a tax increase because they will be reassessed. The old exemptions from the prior owner go away, and so typically a new owner will pay more in taxes than the previous owner paid. And realtors don't necessarily want to say that to somebody, because it might turn them off and cause them to change their mind about making the purchase. Back to assessments. Now in Florida, assessments, as I said, are done every year. And unlike other states, they're not necessarily based on the sale price of that individual home. That price is considered, but only along with other properties that are similar or comparable properties. And the property appraiser will be looking at things like the build quality. Is it a cheaply built home or an expensively built home, or something in the middle? They look for things like swimming pools, they look at location. So a comparable property is likely one that is most similar to your property, and one that's nearby. and that has sold recently. So especially in Florida, that last point is important because property values rising. If you're assessed based on the value as of January 1st, comparable sales from December are much more important to look at from the appraisal standpoint than from July or June earlier in the year when prices were lower. Now, typically in Florida, your original assessed value will be based on the estimated true value, or they call it just or true values, the language that property appraisers use. But they will base it so that they'll take the true value of your property or the market value. They will take a subtraction or subtractions or adjustments to account for things like transaction costs, like documentation stamps, closing costs, appliances that may have been included in the price but that are not technically real estate. And in Florida, as a rule of thumb, I just use the 80% rule, that on your first year of your new assessment, once you purchase a property, you're probably going to have your assessment in the 80% of the purchase price range, unless you bought it early in the year and prices rose. In that case, you might have paid $400 for your home in February, but it's worth $450 by the end of the year. So your assessment would be based on and probably come in about 80% of the $450 rather than 80% of what you paid. And the assessed value is on the very first year, or the first January after you qualify, your assessed value and your just value will be equal. So that's your new basis point. Years following, the following January, your assessment may go up $50,000. I'm sorry, your true value, your market value may go up $50,000, but your assessed value will be capped at either the CPI or 3%. So that kicks in the first January you live in the home. It doesn't apply to prior assessments or exemptions that the prior owner had. So you have to just kind of suck it up. Florida does a really good job of taking advantage of tourists and new residents for the tax base. The longer you live here, the more you love it. Now, your assessed value is the value that, remember, on year one, it is your market value and your assessed value are equal. After that, your assessed value is capped. So your second and subsequent years, your assessed value will be less than your market or just value. And that's cumulative. So if capping on the first year of your occupancy saved you $20,000 in assessed value, the second year could save another 10 or 20 or 30,000, and that accumulates. So the difference, the gap between your assessed value and your true market value grows. And that's called portability. And portability, again, is the difference between your assessed value and basically your neighbor who just moved in, their assessed value. Another point I want to make is that assessed value and taxable value help determine your tax, but your tax itself is not capped. Your assessed value is capped, then the assessed value minus your homestead exemptions gives you your taxable value. But the millage rate is what is used to determine your tax. The millage rate is multiplied times the taxable value to get your property tax. All right, well, that's the end of our first video. It's not the last. We intend to do this every week. We hope you keep coming back. We'll be here. We're looking forward to doing more of these, and we'll be broad-ranging topics, but they'll all be real estate related. I'm Toby Tobin, and I approve this video.